Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'fiim beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu b'tzeitzeim beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamlomed Torah le'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'cha banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Okay. All right, guys, we're going to get started. Now, there were a couple of issues that we had to clear from yesterday in terms of principles and what's going on, because there seems like a lot of contradictions. If you have a look, one of the contradictions is when the Mishna elaborates at the bottom, and it says, what is the case which she pays what she has benefited? If she ate appropriate foods from the middle of the street, she pays what she has benefited. But if she ate from the sides of the street, she pays what she has damaged. Similarly, if she ate from the entrance of the store, she pays what she has benefited. But if she ate from inside the store, she pays what she damaged. Now, the reason why I battled with this, and I had to listen to Rabbi Cohen's audio, which I was listening to, and backwards and forwards, listening, stopping, etc., and reading some of the Meforshim on the Daf notes, is that this is confusing according to how the principles have been learned in our case history. Okay? And one of the difficulties with the principles is that the first thing that you should note is that we've learned an automatic case that in the public domain, what's the case for Shane and Regal that we've learned classically? Exemption, yes, that there's absolutely no payment. There's no payment involved. Okay, so that doesn't seem to be the case here when you initially read it. Then there's also some areas, it seems, of confusion about where you are in the street and whether you're paying in those cases for Keren or whether you're not paying for it in Keren. And particularly what Kevin brought up yesterday with regards to a case of considered like a bakkie on the highway, where vagrants help themselves onto the bakkie and steal a whole lot of potatoes and apples, etc. It might be in the middle of Louis Botha Avenue, but it's certainly they don't have permission to steal the contents in the bakkie. So Kevin answered that very, very well. So we're learning quite a few interesting concepts here of shade. One of the issues we're going to tackle is we always thought, for example, a definition of shade is what you eat in the private domain. Correct, guys?
Yeah.
What food you eat. It turns out that when we learn about this case of a donkey climbing up to eat the turnip and breaking the barrel, that you're also liable for the barrel. Now, it would seem, okay, maybe you're liable for the barrel in terms of half payment damages, because it's an unusual act where the animal is climbing up the barrel. But we actually work out that you pay full payment damages. Now, isn't that a little bit unusual when you think about it?
Yes, it is.
Or counterintuitive. Right, because you say, okay, it's accidental. What donkey generally does barrel climbing? And since it's unusual, you can say either you don't pay damages or you pay half damages for carrying the unusual aspect. But here you're paying full payment. So this is the first time we learn of a case, or the donkey eating apples and destroying a basket. This is the first time we learn a case where generally you have an act of shame to get to that actual item of shame. What are we talking about? If within the animal, like a donkey eating apples, it destroys the basket, because almost, as I said yesterday, I've had once or twice where I've had hot dogs at these like shiur functions. I've been ravenous and I'm eating them and I've realized half my serviettes disappeared. So that was in order to get the food. Okay, I mean, that didn't get me many shidduchim. But the reality is that if the animal consumes or damages an item in order to get to the food, that is full payment damages because it actually goes under the category of shame.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that's something we learned yesterday that was new, and that was something Rabbi Cohen brought to my attention because it seemed a little bit peculiar. So that's one of the principles we learn about shame. So there's a whole range of actions that you get to the food, which is part of the shame, full damages in the private domain. That's one concept. Normal behavior of an animal getting to an item of food is full payment damages because that's not abnormal damage for half damages. It's under the category of shame. Then the second principle we learned was it depends in the public domain, the Rishus Harabim, where the damage takes place as to whether it's shame, keren, or complete absolution. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the second concept that we're going to be dealing with in this particular daf. Okay? And the third concept is that shame in the public domain where you don't pay, you actually pay what you call a minimal sort of damage because we learned automatically you don't pay. So this is the curiosity. Rabbi Cohen said to me, and he said to other people when he addressed the shir, that it doesn't go under the category of shame, okay? Because shame is when the animal eats, and if the animal ate, for example, caviar, 3,000 rands worth of caviar, but your next meal you would have fed the animal 20 rands worth of hay. Then, in fact, it's as if you went to the shops and your next animal meal was taken care of. So for feeding an animal normally, you would pay to have that animal feed for your animal to consume. Therefore, you are purchasing the equivalent of the animal's next meal because that next meal has been taken care of. Compliments of somebody else. So whilst you don't have to pay the 3,000 rand of caviar, you certainly have to pay the 20 rand because your animal is now burping caviar and it's full as a tick. Does that make sense? So that's not a contradiction to shame. That's you paying the equivalent of your animal's next meal. And we're going to see the rate stipulation. Do we have any questions so far?
I'm cool.
Michael?
Right.
Okay. So we're just going to go through this a second. We are going to do a little bit of chazorah to make this clear, but we're going to go quite fast. Okay. So basically, let me just get out that. Okay. So, all right. What used to happen, you know what? Some of the daf notes were not 100% correct. So I was just clarifying with Rabbi Cohen. All right. So let's just go through the actual areas itself. If the animal ate appropriate foods from the middle of the street, she pays what she has benefited. Okay? So in that case, that's a classic case of shame which is exempt in the public domain, which means it's normal for the animal to be in the middle of the street. So if the animal consumes, you don't have any shame payment to the value of the food consumed. That's number one. Number two, if there is food in the middle of the street, which she ate, not on the back of the animal, but in the actual public domain, in that particular case, an animal usually walks in the middle of the street, so it's normal shame. It's not abnormal. It's not caring because the animal's not wandering off. And in that case, you're exempt for shame, but you pay the equivalent of the animal's next meal, which is not a shame payment. Okay, so that's number one. Then, if she ate from the side of the street, she pays what she has damaged. So the term there is damaged. So what they bring here, according to Tosfot in 21a and then Nachalas Moshe, is that is a law of Keren. So you pay half damages for the first three occurrences and full damages afterwards. And even Rashi agrees, meaning it's unusual for the animal to go to the side of the street, and therefore that is an abnormal act, an unusual act, and it's half payment. That's why it says she pays what she has damaged. And do you remember that Keren is obligated in the public domain? Fine. The next statement, similarly, if she ate from the entrance of the store. Now, let me explain to you what the entrance of the store actually had. So I don't know if they got this today, Arthur, at the Shuk in Israel's, but they had what you call these shutters, because not everybody every day took their wares and their stock out of the store and replaced them in their home. They had like lockable what do you call it, tents made out of, in those days, either metal or wood, etc., where it was locked. But what happened is the roller shutter fence, where you could get into the entrance, then be curved over, and then all the wares would be displayed outside the store. So the entrance, which was interestingly enough, would, when it was lifted halfway up, could come perpendicular and at a slight angle where you could rest your food and your wares there and display them like trays.
Okay, well,
right.
Here they've just got the shutters that come down, and most of them have doors now because they've turned it in Jerusalem. It's like there are a lot more restaurants there, but now all the like little shuk places all have roller shutters coming down. No, just straight, not curved or anything, just straight down.
Exactly. Well, that's what I remember. Okay, so if that is the particular case, the explanation given to this actually, Michael, was Tosfot in 21a. I actually didn't know exactly how it worked. Okay. So in that particular case, when the animal does that, she pays what she has benefited. So what does it mean she pays what she has benefited? It's not technically considered inside the store, so it's still considered the public domain. And in that particular case, it's considered where the animal pays, the owner of the animal pays the animal's next meal of what it consumes. But there's no shade payment. There's shade exemption. Does that make sense at the entrance of the store? So this is the thing that made me query what was going on. Why? Because is it not unusual for an animal to go to the entrance of the store? In other words, if you want to propose on the side of the street, it's unusual for the animal to go there. And it's usual for an animal to just walk through the street. I'd say fine. But then how can being at the side of the entrance of the store not be deemed carrying unusual damage? And the reason being, which I found out later, is because generally animals would, somebody that would be buying in that particular store would walk past like you would a shuk and choose certain wares. Does that make sense? Or actually walk past those stores to go for a chat. So it wasn't unusual because the owner's animal would lead them to that particular position. And if it would lead them to that particular position, it's not like the animal went to the side of the street where there's absolutely nothing to do at the side of the street. The question that still arises for me is if there's a private store and the entrance of the food is then, why aren't you obligated for shame, since is that not constituting part of the store owner's private domain? I'm going to speak to Rabbi Cohen just to clarify. But it said if she ate from inside the store, she pays what she has damaged. Now, this is the problem that I have in particular because I read the Daf notes, okay? And the Daf notes are saying as follows. It says if you go to Daf Yomi notes, the one Arthur gave me, right, Arthur? It says if it ate from the of the store, it pays what it benefited. If it ate from inside the store, it pays half damage for carrying. So this is what bothers me about the particular daf, is that when, just like if you want to use the case later, where the animal, like Kevin says, eats off the food off the back of another animal, that food were contained within that, and that is considered in private domain, like you're almost raiding a person's car. Then why, when you enter the store, which is a private domain of the shop owner, are you only responsible for half payment damages for carrying? If you want to say it's unusual for an animal to enter a store, then fine, but then you still should be obligated for the Shane aspect because you've entered the person's store. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, Michael, did you miss what we discussed now?
I'm so a bit peeved that I've got people to help me, but they can't go to the door when it rings. Um, I got to the part where the donkey, for example, leads the owner. The owner's chatting to people in the store, and it's not uncommon for the donkey to nibble something, and it's considered it's a payment of that's why I got a payment of it's a payment of his next meal or half damages. That's why.
Okay, so I just want to repeat two sentences for you, Michael.
Yeah.
Issues that are bothering me, I'm sure it might be bothering the other guys. So if the animal ate from the entrance of the store, she pays what she has benefited.
Yes.
Meaning that there is no payment for Shane. She just pays the equivalent of her next meal because it's considered the public domain. Okay.
And how do you yes, and that's okay. So all right.
So the thing of it is, what bothers me is that it seems not to be unusual for the animal to be at the entrance of the store. The only reason I would figure is I thought it was like an old-fashioned Western, Gavin, where you had public areas, like where you've got a parking lot, where you park your car.
Yeah.
In the old-fashioned Westerns, Gavin, you would tie your horses outside the saloon. So I thought there's an area when you're creating a public city or a public town that there's a walkway, and the minute you enter the store, you tie your animal up before you start shopping, like you park a car. So to me, this isn't adding any clarity, number one. And number two, there's a contradiction because it said if the animal ate from inside the store, she pays what she has damaged. Now, when it uses the term what she has damaged, according to the Daf Yomi notes that Arthur sent me, it says half damages according to Rashi if it ate from inside the store. Now, the problem I've got, where's Michael gone? By the way, Gav, we're going to remove that editing of you coming late. So don't worry, you're not going to have any of that discussion with me and you. It's not going to be on YouTube. Don't worry about it.
Listen, it's some of my best vocabulary came out of that conversation. So maybe you should post it.
No, of course not. It's just going to look like you came in on out the whole time. So Stephen Herr just entered. I'm not sure why. We'll say hi to him. I'm not quite sure. We'll have a chat to Stephen and see if he can start from the beginning. Not today. Stephen, how's it? We're just carrying on with the concept. But what we'll do, you and I must make an arrangement privately to catch up.
Yeah. That's good. All right, just available.
Just welcome. I'm just going to carry on a sec. All right. So Michael, Kevin, Arthur, Gavin, and Stephen. So what I'm saying is the difficulty that I don't understand is that when you enter a store, which is now, how is that any different to the private domain of taking food off the back of an animal, where Kevin used that insight, where it's like opening somebody's car door in Vagrants when you're stuck at a red robot, come and help themselves to groceries at the back of your car. You're actually in somebody's official store. Why would that be a case of Karen where you pay half damages for unusual damage, even though it's unusual for an animal to go in the store? But why would it be unusual? Why? Because if there's food in the store, it would be normal for an animal to seek food. That's number one. So if you want to turn around and say that an animal damaging a barrel because it's trying to get to a turnip is okay because it's Shane, because it's a means to accessing the food, and therefore under the category of Shane, it's full payment. Surely entering a food store is normal for an animal in order to access food. And since you're in the private domain, that to me would be a case of Shane payment, where you're paying in the private domain of another, at which is full payment. Why would it be listed in the Mishna under half payment damages for carrying?
Isn't it maybe because if the owner's there, there's, they could stop the animal in some way. I mean, it's not like in many other cases, I don't know. The animal's left to its own devices, whether it's going to damage, whether it's going to a shame thing. Here, there's some sort of control by the owner or the person who owns the shop or the owner of the donkey or the owner of the shop. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. There's a way of...
That's a possibility, but then my next question to you is, if it ate it from the entrance of the store, it pays what it benefited, meaning it only pays the equivalent of its next meal, but you don't pay for shame for any of the food that you damaged or consumed, the animal, at the entrance of the store. Now, if it's standard policy, Kevin, even for the animal, in other words, if I've got a shop and I'm displaying my wares outside on the vendor trays from the roller shutters, according to Tosfot in 21a, if I'm displaying my food there, surely there should be a municipal law to state that that is also part of my private domain. Does that make sense? In other words, the animal shouldn't be there at all. So why do you say that it's exempt because it's the public domain, because the store entrance is technically outside, when in fact all the goods are privately owned and the animal's naturally going to go there? Don't you obligate the owner to make sure it ties its animal up in almost an equivalent of a parking lot where you have an old-fashioned Western movie where they tie the horse up with a wooden beam, with a, what do you call it? It's a harness. I mean, surely you would think that the extension of the store and the store is the same. So how can you call the one exempt and inside the store it's suddenly an unusual act of carrying, when an unusual act of carrying is not unusual? Because if an animal smells food in a store, it's just like climbing on a barrel to eat the turnip. It's a means to get to that shane. Therefore, anything you damage within the process of getting to shane classifies under full damage of shane. So these are my questions where the Mishnah doesn't make sense to me, which is the lack of my understanding.
Was the shop completely opened, or was there a doorway? So that's why the entrance would be, if there was a doorway blocking it, and the animal got through the doorway that was actually closed, then I can understand that being an unusual act, maybe. But if I
can't answer your question. Tosfot in 21a says, when opening their stores, storekeepers would take down the shutters and lay them in front of the store, using them as vendor trays for displaying their wares. These shutter trays are what the Mishnah calls the entrance of the store.
But then the whole store is the entrance to the store.
No, it means that the store is open. So what it's saying is as follows. The roller shutters that are coming down, that at night they lock up their store. But during the day they keep it open so you can enter the store. And those roller shutters are now used as display trays, which means the store is open. Because
what's the entrance to the store?
No. Tosfot uses the term when opening their stores. Storekeepers would take down their shutters and lay them in front of the store and using them as vendor trays for displaying their wares. At the
Correct.
entrance.
But isn't that the entrance to your store, those stuff on display? And then behind there, baby, you have a proper store.
No. Understand. Outside there's the display area. The door is open because your roller shutter has been removed as a display tray where you put all your stuff on, not to lie on the ground. And then you've got full access to the store. So the animal people can walk through the store.
Yeah, so it's just completely... So it's open plan, basically. Yeah.
Yes. Marco wanted to say, why would the owner let the person in? But maybe if you're dealing with a lot of customers, believe me, an animal that comes in for 2 minutes and takes something to eat is difficult to watch. And you can't sit there the whole day being a bouncer of your store in case goats come in.
Absolutely.
So I'm saying
And the
these are
owner,
that I've got.
and the onus is also on the owner. It's not just the shopkeeper. The owner's there too. And neither of them are able to stop the animal, looks like, or see what the animal's done.
Yeah, 100%. So these are some of the issues I wanted to just.
Like trampling, Damon. Animal knocks down things and that. You just got to watch that. Huh?
Okay, so that's a good question. So Stephen asked a good question here: is what happens when an animal knocks down things? And this is a classic case of regel, where the animal is exempt in the public domain. If the animal uses its body and it damages things while walking past, in the public domain, it's exempt. So in the entrance of the store, you're obligated, and in the store, you're definitely obligated. At the entrance of the store, it would appear here that you're not obligated. And I'm saying that you should be obligated because it's private property. The minute a store owner sets up a store, you can't have a situation where animals walk past, either eat or knock things, that all of a sudden it's deemed as exemption, public domain, because it's saying here, if it ate at the entrance of the store, it pays what it benefited. Mean there's no shane payment, just its equivalent of its next meal. And then if you exempt for shane, because it's the same pasuk, you exempt for regel, which means if the animal knocked something over. So I need to speak to Rabbi Khan because it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, so you don't know the answer because
I'm sorry, Marco. I don't.
If it eats its shame, if it bumps it over its regel in the private domain, if it's in the store, I mean, that's it, finished.
At the entrance of the store, I wouldn't be able to discern between the entrance of a store and the actual store itself. Okay. Now I wanted to go through an idea for 4 minutes quickly. With you guys, a separate idea. And what we're going to do tomorrow is I'm going to try and get some clarity from Rabbi Cohen, where we can fly through a little bit of Chazorah of this Mishnah up until the part where we discuss about asparta, which is where the animal consumes. In other words, if some of the food is in the private domain and some is in the public domain, is it where the food grows or where it's the food consumes? Is it the percentile of where the animal eats in the private domain, or is it the percentile where the animal eats in the public domain? So we're going to deal with these issues. And I just wanted to go through something for a few minutes. But guys, these are the concepts of why we learn the daf. And I didn't want you to lose sight by just discussing Bryce's, what we're actually trying to determine here. So we're going to finish in about 3-4 minutes. Gavin, I just wanted to read something for you, specifically for you, which is why I'm pleased you came. Because Gavin was discussing with me, just very quickly, there's a Rabbi Manis Friedman, that does a lot of shiurim for this generation, because this generation feel that they kind of resent authority and they resent being told what to do. And they don't feel that it's fair to be born in a world against their will, and where they're told to do mitzvahs and they're told to listen, etc. It has to do particularly with this generation, but it did repeat itself in the post-Vietnam scenario where you had your hippie and flower power, where most of those hippies ended up being part of the stock market, stockbrokers trading share prices. They changed in the hippie clothes, and then all of a sudden they became part of the corporate world when they got married and had to put food on the table. So you know the saying: if you're not a if you're not a socialist in your 20s, you have no heart. If you're still a socialist in your 40s, you have no brain. I mean, the reason being is that there are stages in your life where you have to be very compassionate and understand that maybe you need to rail against authority because the status quo doesn't always work. But as Jordan Peterson says, you have to put your own house in order and have your own level of self-discipline. You can't go around giving other people mussar if your life's a disaster. So, Gavin, I just want to read this one verse in Pirkei Avot that I wanted you to bear in mind with regards to this Rabbi Manus Friedman. So it's in chapter 5, verse 29. So Rabbi Elazar HaKappar used to say, the newborn will die, the dead will live again, the living will be judged, in order that they know, teach, and become aware that Hashem is God. He is the fashioner, He is the creator, He is the discerner, He is the judge, He is the witness, He is the plaintiff, He will judge. Blessed is he before whom there is no iniquity, no forgetfulness, no favoritism, no acceptance of bribery, for everything is his. Know that everything is according to the reckoning, and let not your evil inclination promise you that the grave will be an escape for you. For against your will you were created, against your will you were born, against your will you will live, against your will you will die, and against your will you are destined to give an account before the King who rules over kings, the Holy One, blessed is he. And the reason why I brought this particular verse is that at the end of the day, it shows you that everything that happens to our soul, our life, etc., we have very, very little control. And to rail against it and say it's not fair is not going to help you, because at the end of the day, you could ignore certain facts and say, well, it doesn't feel fair, but you will ignore those facts at your peril. And at the end of the day, you could have a lot of idealism, but if you're married and you have children and you don't put food on the table, you're going to starve. If you say, I don't want to be part of this corporate rat race, or I don't like the way society is run, or I don't like the fact that Hashem is telling me that I have to keep these mitzvahs, fine. You might have, you might have what you consider for yourself a realistic case that it's being done against your will. And this Mishnah is basically saying, yes, everything that has happened to you is against your will. Believe me, nobody here is living the dream. Just telling.
Just quickly, what are those three categories?
Sorry,
Dame, it says just at the beginning, those three things, those who do this will get that, those who do this will get, just quickly sorry, it's too late, I can phone you.
No. So look, I mean, what I want to do is this particular Mishnah needs actually a lot of discussion, because what actually comes forward is not only the depressing state that everything's against our will, but a comfort that those that abuse other people in this world are going to have a reckoning. You cannot get away with anything. And although it's depressing to know that we have to give an accounting, if you follow the rules and if you are generous and compassionate to another, you are protected. But sometimes we've been conned in our life, or things have gone wrong, and we need to know that justice will prevail, not as revenge, but that you can't get away with hurting other people. So this is both depressing and a comfort. So we're going to deal with this issue as separate matters. There are 12 different matters that are discussed here within this one little paragraph, and we're going to unravel